Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all, whichever part of the world you are listening from. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Board of the Advocates for Dignity, I would like to welcome you to the second Advocates for Dignity webinar. This webinar has also reached an international audience, including our speakers, who are from the US, Europe, and Australia. For those of you that don't know Advocates for Dignity, we are an advocacy organization that seeks to promote the rule of law, democracy, and to preserve the fundamental human rights and liberties with a special focus on Turkey and its citizens abroad. AFD is a non-profit organization established by Australians of Turkish descent who seek to raise awareness about the injustices taking place to make the wider Australian community aware of the unlawful crackdown on the citizens and the cessation of press freedom in Turkey. This evening's webinar, titled Erdocide, Erdogan's Neo-Modern Societal Genocide, we have a Q&A panel with 3 speakers and a panel moderator. Our panelists include former Turkish Navy Colonel Huseyin Demirtas, who is the author of the book Erdocide, Dr. Merj, Hemp, the founder of the Global Dialogue for Justice, and Associate Professor Bayram Erzurumluoglu, who is a social scientist and a researcher formerly employed by the Adıyaman University in Turkey. Our 3 panelists will be asked a series of questions by former ABC TV current affairs producer, Dr. Peter Manning. You may be asking that the labeling of what is happening in Turkey as a genocide may be a little too harsh, as genocide means the deliberate killing of a large group of people, especially those of a particular nation or an ethnic group. As ethnic groups are not being taken into concentration camps and mass murdered, how could we call what is happening in Turkey a genocide? And what do our panelists mean by the term social genocide? Well, at the end of the 1-hour webinar, we will have answers to all of these questions. So don't go anywhere for the next hour. Without further ado, I will introduce our facilitator for the webinar, Dr. Peter Manning. Peter is a very good friend of mine. I went to Turkey with him in 2007. He's a well-known Australian journalist, author, broadcaster, commentator, and academic. He's an adjunct professor in journalism at the School of Communication at the University of Technology, Sydney. His new book, Representing Palestine, Media and Journalism in Australia Since World War I, has just been released in London, Sydney, and the USA. He was awarded his Doctor of Philosophy in the Faculty of Arts and Sciences at the University of Technology, Sydney in 2014. He was a senior lecturer in journalism at Monash University from 2009 to 2012, and a professor of journalism at UTS from 2000 to 2009. He also taught Sydney and Qatar universities. Prior to teaching, he had a 30-year career in journalism. He was the head of news and current affairs at the 7 Network from 1996 to 2000, and the head of TV news and current affairs at the ABC from 1989 to 1993. In the latter role, he began the ABC's very successful website, abc.net.au, and founded Late Line, Foreign Correspondent, and Landline. In the 1980s, he was a field producer and then executive producer of the famous current affairs program Four Corners, winning many awards for its investigative journalism. He began his career at Fairfax and has been a reporter in print, online, radio, and television. He's also the author of 4 other books: Janet Van Brown, A Life in Art, 2016, Us and Them, Media, Muslims and the Middle East in 2006, Dog Whistle Politics and Journalism in 2004, and Green Bands in 1975. I'll now hand over to Peter to introduce our 3 panelists one by one. Thanks, Peter.
Thank you. The recent human rights report on Turkey is not good reading. The first page of it, Human Rights Watch, says Turkey has been experiencing a deepening human rights crisis over the past 4 years, with a dramatic erosion of its rule of law and democracy framework. It goes on to talk in this yearly report about the use of torture in particular, and particularly, he says, a rise in allegations of torture, ill treatment, and cruel and inhuman or degrading treatment in police custody and prison over the past 4 years. It has targeted those including Kurds, leftists, and alleged followers of Fethullah Gulen. This is not a partisan body. It is a world-respected global institution, and Turkey gets a very bad write-up. It records that Turkey has 70,000 people on trial, that it has 160,000 under criminal investigation on terrorism charges linked to the Gulen movement. That's 230,000 people in jail. This is in July 2019. Equally, the BBC reports similar elements of Turkey's human rights crisis. And tonight, we're going a bit further to look at what the regime of torture, what the regime of lack of freedom, the jailing of 119 journalists on various charges, what this situation means for Turkish people, particularly who love their home and are nationalistic and understand the long traditions of pride in the Ottoman Empire. So tonight we will talk with three very outstanding people who care deeply about Turkey, care about what has happened to them and what we can do about it. Let me introduce Dr. Merj Hemp, who is a Filipino person originally, now in the United States, has her BA and her MA in communications and a PhD in curriculum and instruction from New Mexico State University. Her research interests include crisis communication and global community engagement. In 2009, she conducted original mixed method research on improving crisis communications for her master's thesis. She continues to explore the same topic for her doctoral research, exploring the multiple perspectives of Arab Muslim women in the post 9/11 era. This could not be more relevant to this discussion. And then we have Dr. Bayram Erzurumluoglu, who is hang on, I've just lost this one for a second. Is an academic, an associate professor, doctor, teaching and carrying out social research at the Public Management Department of the Faculty of Management and Administrative Sciences of a university in Turkey. That was true until the attempted coup, allegedly, of 15 July 2016 in Turkey. He was fired from his work without any proof, as thousands of other academics, teachers, judges, journalists, writers, doctors, engineers, civil servants, and so on were sacked and terrorized by the Islamist government of Turkey. Finally, we have a Turkish naval officer who has represented his country as a frigate commanding officer in different regions of the open seas and as a Turkish naval attaché to Bucharest, Romania, in a diplomatic mission. He was dismissed from the service when he was one of the department heads in the Center of Excellence Against Terrorism, accredited to NATO in Ankara, on January 6th, 2017, with an executive degree. All his civil and social rights were seized by an unlawful and illegitimate act, including medical care, pension, private funds. Whatever a citizen, he says, has, it is seized by illegitimate members of a criminal organisation. So he, as a colonel within the defence forces of Turkey, rose to the top of the ranks. So I will begin the discussion today by inviting Dr. Merj Kemp to make her own introduction and with her own thoughts.
Thank you, Dr. Manning. It's an honor to be introduced by an amazing academic, journalist, researcher, activist, humanitarian, and author. I'm already a big fan of yours. So your book, Us and Them, reminds me of why I went to school, why somebody whose parents never saw what a high school classroom looks like. And today I walk around with 3 letters attached to my name. And it's a privilege, but also I realize that it is a calling, that today, I can join people, amazing people who are fighting for justice, to share the voices of those people who are weakened by injustice. Tonight, I will share a little bit about myself as a person, as a scholar, and some of the things that I've been trying to do to give back to our community, to our global community. But first, I'd like to say, Mr. Mehmet, Saral, and the entire Advocates for Dignity organization, thank you so much for your invitation for me to join this important conversation. Now, my friends and advisors at the Global Dialogue for Justice, Colonel Huseyin Demirtas and Dr. Bayram Erzurumluoglu, it's always nice seeing you both, and really an honor being here with you tonight. And I would like to say hello to good evening to our friends watching right now in Sydney and Melbourne and Canberra and everybody in Australia. So thank you so much. And also our friends in Turkey, in Belgium, Germany, the Netherlands. And to my fellow Americans, good morning here from the Sunshine State. Before I continue, I would like to get through, I think the most challenging part of this evening for me is I would like to send a message to those of you in Turkey. And while I sit here in the US and free, I can speak, and many of you out there are in prison and suffering from torture and repression, imprisonment, including babies. I want you to know that what we're doing here is for you, that we are not blind and deaf of your suffering. So let me share you a little bit about where I came from. I grew up in the Philippines under a dictator, a brutal dictator. And I spent most of my childhood under the martial law. It's hard for a child to grow up in this kind of conditions. So we see injustice is not new to me. And then I've been fighting all my life. And even here in the USA, and maybe you also know that here, the inequality, racism is pervasive. So I came to America with no education. I grew up on the streets. And on 9/11, I watched the tower collapse. And I didn't know what's going on. And it forced me to learn about my community, about my country, and about the world. And today it has taken me here. It has taken me to doing the global dialogue for justice, to challenging the inequality in education. And now I have done the offshoot of my dissertation into a film. And I traveled to Turkey and in many places. And I learned about the injustices that's happening over there that I wanted to share with my people in the United States, with students especially, and to give them the opportunity to use the advances in technology to see for themselves what's happening today. And I'd like to challenge my fellow educators and scholars to take a look on what's happening globally, no matter where you are, and no matter if you don't speak Turkish or the other language. That's why we have Google Translate. I do that all the time, and I know that you can do it too. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Kemp. Not just MA, not just graduate, but Dr. Kemp. Can we move on now to Dr. Bayram? Are you able to give us a summary introduction to your thoughts?
Thank you very much. I don't like talking about myself, so I will give you a brief information about myself. I am an academic, a social scientist, and a human rights activist trying to survive an oppressive regime and fight lawlessness of that regime from inside Turkey. Thank you very much. That's
very good. Thank you. And Colonel Huseyin Demirtas, can you give us a summary of what you'd like to say at the beginning?
So hello to everyone, to the world. So we are talking to the world globally. I will not keep so short because my personal story is also a story of Turkish citizens. So I was a Turkish naval officer, a public servant. I served my country in the Turkish armed forces for 22 years. I'm almost 50 years old, married, a father of 3 children. So I'm just a simple human being. And as you introduced in the beginning, I represented my country in different positions. And lastly, in an honorable position in a diplomatic mission as a military diplomat. So I represented my country, my citizens. So I lived lots of things, some adventure, I call it. And Erdogan's bureaucracy dismissed me from the public service when I was serving in a NATO Center of Excellence Against Terrorism. So this is also ironic. Now, what I am doing, I am fighting against this dictatorship to serve my nation and humanity as an individual human rights activist, as a researcher, and as an author. Coming to my personal story, because as I told you, it is also the story of every Turkish citizen, every innocent Turkish citizens who became a victim of Erdocide. So I call this Erdocide as Erdogan's systemic pre-planned genocide. As you know, something happened in July 15, 2016. Hundreds of our citizens were killed, some wounded, thousands were wounded also. But the most important thing, the regime, which founded by Atatürk, was destroyed. And while all these were happening, I was not in Turkey. But when I went to Turkey, when I went back to Turkey, Erdogan's bureaucracy first changed my previous assignment, which was a degrading in a military organization, and I returned, so they detained me and tortured also. So they arbitrarily detained me for killing and wounding people in Ankara, which in reality, I was in Romania. So this is not my own story. This is something happening in Turkey for everyone, for every targeted citizen. So they had nothing.
Colonel, can I ask you what actually happened? Can you take us back to the night of the 15th of July in 2016? What actually happened that night?
So that night, first, the public, the global public, are not able to see the realities behind the official saying, the Erdogan's government saying. Lots of things happened at the same time. So hundreds of my beloved citizens were killed, thousands were wounded. But when I was dismissed, I started to study what happened in reality on that night. And I reached to some level. But the reality can be found only, the pure reality can be found only after an independent and international investigation, because there is no rule of law in Turkey. Because Erdogan himself and his affiliated servants, high-level commanders, and statesmen, high-level statesmen, bureaucrats, the prosecutors, the police, the judges, members of parliament, media are deceiving all the society, covering the real information. And also they are destroying the evidences and obviously lying. So, but the most important thing is Erdogan's affiliated bureaucrats, high commanders, governors, police chiefs, ISIS elements, collaborated ISIS elements, and ambushed their own citizens and soldiers on that night. Step by step, I will just try to summarize what happened generally. The soldiers were directed to some selected certain positions with a false terrorist attack warning. And this warning came from Turkish intelligence. The police were ordered to stay silent and hidden, not to engage the events as a real security force, but to provoke the civilians, to direct them to certain points, and the soldiers, to provoke the soldiers also. The governors and the police chiefs, so they are responsible for the security of the public, So they directed the civilians to certain points. At these points, snipers were located, and they were employed to kill, to injure, and to provoke the civilians by shooting them, especially on the heads, eyes, necks, and chests. So the civilians and the soldiers were provoked against each other. Some others set up an explosion assembly in the parliament, and this presented to global public as an attack of military people. But this was an explosion, an assembly in the parliament, and this assembly was activated while the Air Force aircraft were flying over the capital. So
can I just ask a question so I understand it myself, and hopefully the audience will understand it as well? Because I, as a journalist, I think the reporting of what happened that night was broadly, globally, that there was a split in the military themselves as to who should be the government and shouldn't be the government, and so on and so on, rather than, the military against the people. Is that true?
So I'm just coming there. So the only thing that we can say this is a coup attempt, it was an attack to Erdogan. He was, maybe you remember, in a holiday in Marmaris.
Yes.
But so this was the only attack against the government, actually against Erdogan himself. But the attack was done not by the military people. So some terrorist teams were sent to Marmaris, which Erdogan was having a holiday, 3 hours before the soldiers' arrival. And they are hiding this. They are the prosecutors, the judges, the trial, they are all the courts. They are hiding, the bureaucrats. So 3 hours before the soldiers' arrivals, there was a 3 helicopter team. They were terrorists, but they had military camouflage uniforms. And there are more than 50 witnesses of this. So this terrorist team killed police officers, tortured and heavily injured security personnel. And the media, the Erdogan's media, the Erdogan's bureaucracy, his government, they are presenting these incidents as the military officers and petty officers made, which came 3 hours later. So this is the most important thing. So everybody knows this, but they keep silent, even the lawyers. So even the judges, the prosecutors, everybody knows that. And they are deceiving the public, the local and global public, that some team came, some soldiers came to kill Erdogan, to kidnap him, something like that. But in reality, there were 3 helicopters and they came 3 hours before. They did everything, and the government shows that as military people they did it, which is in reality as a decisive, as a deception.
Okay. Can I just move on for, that's a pretty dramatic answer to the question of what happened on that night. Can I ask Dr. Bayram, you've emerged with a theory about the 4 years since that time. It's almost exactly 4 years since that night. Can you explain to us your theory of what you call societal genocide? How did you come up with that theory? What is the theory?
Thank you very much, Dr. Manning. I would like to put a few facts or terms straight before we divide into the subject, basically. According to studies of American political scientist Rudolf Rummel, power kills, and absolute power kills absolutely. Rudolf Rummel, in his work, argues that the more power a government has, the more it tends to kill its own citizens, that he calls it democide, a form of genocide, and make a war on other countries. And conversely, the less power a government has over its citizens, the less it tends to kill them or launch wars of aggression on other countries. According to German Bertelsmann Stiftung Foundation's Quality of Democracy Index 2020, Turkey is now among the autocratic regimes such as Guatemala, Angola, Congo, Iran, Saudi Arabia, etc. Plus, additionally, according to Spanish social scientist and also a political scientist, Juan Lins, according to studies of sultanic regimes, totalitarian or authoritarian regimes, Turkey is under a regime called neo-patrimonial sultanism. Namely, Turkey is governed by a neo-Ottoman sultan as a head of state. After setting these terms or facts straight, now we can talk about genocide, democide, social side, politicide, despotic genocide, societal genocide, etc. These are the traits of despotic regimes only and are in the genocide literature. Basically, I did not invent this social genocide myself. It was in the literature of Claudia Claude, Helen Fane, Rudolf Rummel, or Gregory Stanton, and many other academics who study genocide around the world, basically. Now we can talk about genocide now. Genocide is the implementation of a massive and systematic plan of action intended to destroy all or part of a social group or groups. Moreover, genocide is a process that requires preparation, legitimization, and consensus. These characteristics of genocide distinguish it from other acts of atrocities, such as other mass killings. Social genocide is a form of crime against humanity or societal genocide, social genocide, or social side, is a form of crime against humanity that a person or a group commit mass atrocities on a social group or groups intend to destroy all or part of these social groups, along with their friends, relations, relatives, acquaintances, or anyone who empathize or sympathize to them by means of organized power or state or any other authority that legitimize those atrocities by a set of beliefs such as radical Islamism, Islamic Caliphate, racism, communism, fascism, etc. All genocides have common features as described in the 10 stages of genocide by Gregory Stanton, yet all genocides are also sui generis, unique crimes against humanity concurrently. That's why.
So,
Yeah.
sorry, can I just to make it, you're saying that genocide, this kind of genocide is about deconstructing the whole of society, and not just a matter of, you know, whether how many million people are killed or, you know, things like Rwanda and so on and so on. So it's not just about numbers, it's about structures.
That is absolutely true. And as I said, all genocides are different, sui generis, unique. For example, you cannot compare genocide committed in Germany to genocide committed in Cambodia, in Ukraine by Stalin, in Rwanda by Hutus, I think, this and that. So all genocide have common features as described by Gregory Stanton, but all genocides concurrently unique too.
So what is the unique Erdogan genocide, if you put it like that?
That's true. Now we come to the real question and terms. The atrocities committed by political Islamists in Turkey is termed as societal genocide or social side, firstly because the regime planned, prepared, legitimized, and socially engineered majority of public's consent to all of its atrocities. It has committed on the basis of an Islamic ideology similar to ISIS, you know, the terrorist organization that operated in Iraq and Syria.
Yes, yes.
Taliban or Al-Qaeda. They were similar, but not exactly the same, obviously. Secondly, they labeled, targeted, and victimized hundreds of thousands of innocent people for the crimes that either didn't exist or they did not commit, engaged in, or somehow participated in ancillary. Every targeting and victimization were carried out on the basis of government blacklists, prepared weeks, months, or even years before. Thirdly, targeted populations were so much demonized or dehumanized that this is a part of, you know, that 10 stages of genocide described by Gregory Stanton. They were so much demonized or dehumanized that husbands, wives, partners, children, grandchildren, parents, grandparents, brothers, sisters of those targeted populations could also be punished for just being family members or relatives of those labeled criminals. Furthermore, in some contexts, many people who found the targeted population to console or help them socially or economically were also targeted with the same wrath by being put in the same category of terrorism with them, or at least in the category of aiding or supporting terrorism.
So can I give an example? Is the Gulenists, are they the ones being Fethullah Gulen's supporters, are they the ones now being demonized? Does that fit your definition?
Absolutely true. Not only Gulen, even babies. Actually, I shall mention at this. I shall mention at this stage. According to that radical Islamist ideology, killing babies. I say. I know what I'm saying. Killing babies of labeled people is justified. This ideology comes from medieval period of Islam, basically. And groups like ISIS, Taliban, or Al-Qaeda, or some Islamic, political Islamic groups subscribe to that ideology, so they can kill anyone, man, woman, children, babies of anyone they label as enemies of their form of Islam, basically.
But surely that's not permitted under the Quran, under the common beliefs of most Muslims. Surely
that is true. Surely that is not permitted in the Quran, but it is absolutely categorically permitted in political Islam. That's why I'd like to differentiate between the two, and I'll mention about that probably later.
Yes.
Stage. But whatever they did to babies, children, men, women, anybody disabled, this and that, is absolutely justified in radical commentary of political Islam, which is actually portrayed by ISIS, clear like a day, I think. So in political Islam, everything is permissible, basically. Nothing is forbidden.
Can we come back to that? Because I'd just like to ask Dr. Hemp whether in her work that she's been doing about post-September 11 psychoses and so on, are there some parallels, Dr. Kemp, that you see in Turkey's genocide, historically, or being born at the moment from other conflicts?
Yes, actually, and based on the definition of that is given by Dr. Bayram, instead of me answering this from me, let me share with you the voice of the people who are victims of this genocide. Maybe we can call it political genocide or whatever, but with my work, I went to Munich, and there I filmed the Munich ordination of the Syrian revolution that are, sharing their stories of what's happening in Syria. Here it is. Play.
What have we got here?
It's coming.
Yes.
In Syria, Al-Assad, he's killing children there. He's bombing Syria and Egypt right now. Now, the problem, everybody quiet when they see some people die. They is dying without reason. They are quiet. We just keep quiet, silent. They just keep mouth and just looking at them, crying sometimes if there is something bad news. We are crying. That's all. But the real things, we are here now, and there is people dying in Syria right now, and there is in Syria right now. People, they don't have food, there is no electric, there is no diesel, they don't have fire, they don't have anything.
So
Yes.
that I and so Dr. Bayram, that is a form of genocide that's happening there. There's millions of people dying in Syria. Well, the world is silent. That's what the gentleman is saying there. And that is truly unfortunate that that's happening. And so this discussion, this dialogue, what's happening in Turkey, these are all related. It's happening in Syria, in Yemen, and in different places in the world. And I think it's that's why what we're doing is so important, that the people globally needs to pay attention. And the apathy and complacency is everywhere. And I think it's time for the global community to step up and to learn from Dr. Bayram, from Erdocide, from Colonel Huseyin, and every time we go on broadcast, the Global Dialogue for Justice, we are sharing the voices of these people. And I think it's so important.
And of course, it's ironic, isn't it? Because Turkey takes in more refugees, Syrians in particular, than any other country in the world.
Yes. And that becomes a weapon and a bargaining chip, which is, that is ridiculous that Erdogan is able to do that and the world is cowering. And I think if the global community and the countries will stop playing games, and that includes my country, America, that's selling weapons and, making friends with all these tyrants, I think we're going to get somewhere if the global community will question what's going on. And this platform, and the organization like Advocates for Dignity, is really, really important that we support it and we join the conversation.
Dr. Bayram, can I come back to you to ask, just a simple question? Does Islam allow genocide in any circumstance?
Islam, I would say no. Islam wouldn't allow genocide. But as I said, political Islam would allow it, actually put into action by Taliban, ISIS, Al-Qaeda, etc., terror groups. They always use these methods, and they justify it by calling their victims, if they were Muslims, as heretics, if they are Christians or Jews or this and that, or Yazidis, this and that, they call them infidels anyway. Those people's what they say. And then after naming those people, they are free to do anything they like. They can cut their head off, like actually, done by ISIS on TVs. We all know it. They can enslave them and sell them in markets, like ISIS did it. ISIS did it in the past. Well, they can use any person as sex slave, confiscate their belongings, money, property, whatever they like. They think that they are justified to it, and it is the order of the religion. I don't know what kind of religion they subscribe to, but these radical Islamic groups do it without conscience, without mindlessly, basically. So we should be, how should I say, and their actions is no different from the Inquisition period of the Dark Ages in Europe. As you know, these ideologies should be expressed to the world. The world should know about these dangerous ideologies that legitimize genocidal acts, and these ideologies should be fought by humanity. Otherwise, these people will not give any peace to the world, basically. These people are enemies of humanity. These people are enemies of humanity. Please, yes.
Yeah. Colonel Huseyin, can you share with us some examples of what you call societal genocide in Turkey under the regime?
So excellently, Dr. Bayram explained that, and the first and maybe the most important element of genocidal crimes are to be systematically. So then in Turkey, now I prefer to say under Erdogan's genocidal bureaucracy's regime, there is a societal, there are some main elements of societal genocide here. First, they produced a privileged clan. And then they prepared blacklists, but they used these blacklists as genocidal execution lists under Erdogan's regime. And they captured all the genocidal bureaucracy. They silenced the media and also the society. And they used a package of genocidal methods and tools. So this privileged clan has absolute power in the state, and they all decide the assignments, promotions, retirements, purges, detainments, and dismissals. The main thing they used all these genocidal execution lists. So it doesn't matter you did something or not. It doesn't matter, for example, you are supporting some person, some group or not. It doesn't matter. So they prepare blacklists, and they use these blacklists as genocidal execution lists, and they do detainments, dismissals, firings according to these lists. And these lists are all prepared before 15 July. So it doesn't matter if what you did something in 15 July or not. Even I was in Romania, so it doesn't matter also where you were in the world or not. And they shaped media, so they silenced the Turkish society, but they are deceiving the local and global public with this shaped media. And this in a manipulated environment, all the layers of society are shaped, terrorized, dissociated, and silenced. And the global public was also misled by this dominant but deceptive discourses of Erdogan's genocidal bureaucracy. So
sorry, go on. Yes.
So some tangible examples. As Dr. Bayram said, so in societal genocide in Turkey, raping to Turkish citizens are announced to be halal. Some religious seeming people.
Fatwas, edicts, religious fatwas.
And for example, lots of innocent women, because you know this is a very important value for Muslim women, and they raped. And for example, one Turkish female officer was raped in the front of in a hall, in a sports hall, and she became pregnant. And they took the baby later on. So it's an organized crime. All the parts of society, all the parts of official institutions are taking part in this organized crime. So they are killing people in the prisons. So they are preventing medical care, medical treatment. So they are using these prisons as concentration camps of Hitler. So they are not killing immediately, but they are killing gradually by preventing medical care. And they are killing socially, civilly, economically. They are all blocking all kinds of economical channels to a person to survive in a society. They are blocking.
Can I ask, is that the reason that your book is called Erdocide? Do you really put this down to one man? Is that an unfair title?
So Erdocide is a historical name. It's a symbolic name. So all the part of society, the civil society and the official institutions, they are taking part in Erdocide. So sometimes actively, sometimes passively. So they are dismissing thousands or hundred thousands of people, but this is not a simply dismissal. So they are just killing you socially with your members of your family members, even unborn babies and unborn generations, because they are coding you. And so at first I need to say something. They are just imposing. So it doesn't matter what you are, who you are, where you are, it doesn't matter. They are just using these blacklisting as genocidal executionists and then starts executing one by one. Then they are enlarging your sphere. And for example, they target you, then they target your children, your wife, your grandchildren. Even coding you in social security system, they are targeting your unborn grandchildren. So this is so simple. So that means Erdogan is not alone. Lots of different parts of society is collaborating with him.
But can I ask, over the last year, there's been various mayoral elections, and including in Ankara, which have brought non-Erdogan party people to power against the wishes of the regime. So there must be some eye-opening going on among Turkish people. Do you think?
So elections, they cannot justify some dictatorship. You know, in Belarus, there is also an election. There was also an election. So, but it is not democracy. And you know, the constitution says rule of law is the most ultimate value and most ultimate criteria. So then in Turkey, the rule of law is destroyed. When you destroy rule of law, then it doesn't matter. For example, 80 million people can support Erdogan. It doesn't matter because there is no rule of law. And elections, they are not legal.
Yes.
And they don't legitimize this genocide.
Can I ask, Merj, do you see any light at the end of this tunnel? Can anything be done about this?
Yes, definitely. But it's really, really hard. Based on, I'll tell you from personal experience from the People Power Revolution at Erdocide in 1986, where every sector of society everywhere said enough of the dictatorship, enough of the torture, enough of the killings. And people from all walks of life set aside their differences, their values and traditions and culture, their practices, their, their team, their sports team. They learn to set this aside and swallow their pride and said, we have to topple the dictator. If we don't come together, it's going to continue. It's going to keep going. So what they did, from nuns, farmers, students, artists, and the cardinal, religious leaders, military officers, they said enough is enough. And in the beginning, it was really hard because the military was pointing their guns and their tanks ready to run over the people. That we did our protests for 3 days, and they were ready. But in the end, they realized that they need to side with the right side of justice, and that happened only because we made that commitment to work together. So I think there is hope, And what you can see that's happening in Turkey right now, all over the place, there's so many people are suffering, and it's going to be just a matter of time before the people in Turkey say enough is enough.
Thank you. Look, I'm sure all three speakers have got plenty yet to say, but I think we're going to have to bring this to a close right now. But it's been so good, I think, to air some of the realities of what's been happening. It can be written up in, United Nations documents and people tut-tutting around the world. But the idea that we can actually, as a people, get things going and make it happen and say goodbye to the Marcos family. Hopefully something more can be done. Okay, now, can I pass back to Advocates for Dignity, the Australian organisation, and to Mehmet Saral.
Yes, Peter, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Unfortunately, I can't turn my video on. If someone, if Burak can turn that on for us, I can't turn it on. Here we go. I think should be able to turn it. Yes, here we are.
You're on.
Okay, good. All right. Thank you to all our three panelists for the great insights that you have given our listeners on the term Erdocide and societal genocide. And thank you in particular to the former Turkish Navy Colonel Huseyin Demirtas, whom I initially contacted when planning this webinar. And for the great insights, his book and many webinars that he has given on the web about the coup attempt and its consequences in Turkey. He's really done a great job there. And we have to, congratulate him in being a flag bearer for the victims of Turkey. You embrace all victims of the social genocide happening in Turkey, and you don't discriminate against any minority group, and that's what I like about you very much. As for Dr. Bayram, he is the mastermind of the social genocide theory, and with this theory he has enlightened all of us of the clandestine grand plan of Erdogan and his allies to control and rule Turkey with an iron fist, unfortunately. Dr. Merj is a true humanitarian in practice. She has a great vision for global dialogue for justice and wants people to stand up against all oppressors in their respective homelands, as the Filipinos did against Marcos, was it back a couple of decades ago, where the Filipinos stood up and the dictator was defeated. In a similar fashion, the people of Turkey need to stand up against Erdogan. Today, Erdogan has 40% supporters. It's not 60% are against him, so it doesn't take much to stand up against a man who doesn't have majority votes. The time at Florida at the moment is 6 a.m. now, and she has been up since the crack of dawn to be with us in this webinar. And that in itself is a dedication when someone steps out of their comfort zone to speak out. And thank you too to Peter for the insightful questions you have asked in order to educate our listeners on this topic. Your investigative journalism goes a long way in informing our viewers. I remember in 2007, 13 years ago, you and I were in Turkey, and we were saying so many nice things about Turkey, the democracy in Turkey, the Turkish economy was improving leaps and bounds. And that same leader, who was very democratic at the time, has become a dictator. He's changed. He was like a wolf in sheep's clothing. And he's come out and virtually 180 degrees the other direction. Finally, I'd like to thank all the viewers for taking their time out from their busy schedule to watch this second webinar of ours. And I look forward to you all at our next event, which will be which will also be a webinar. And please look out for that upcoming webinar on our website, advocatesfordignity.org.au. Thank you for joining us tonight, and have a good night.